If you are struggling to touch your toes or in general with posterior chain flexibility, then this video is perfect for you. We will go through a combination of both dynamic as well as static exercises that are gonna help you build absurd flexibility in your entire posterior chain. And you'll notice that touching your toes is actually way easier than you thought it would be if you approach it the right way. So if you're ready, we're gonna break it down step by step, go through all of the exercises and see what you can do to touch your toes in a matter of weeks. Now, before we get into the exercises themselves, I have one simple yet very effective technique, a mobility hack of sorts at the very end of the video. If you wanna go through all of these exercises, they're gonna be very helpful for reaching that goal. If you do not care about the exercises themselves, you should at the very least check out this mobility hack because it's gonna help you with the rest of your flexibility or mobility goals. Timestamps, as always, are down below. Starting with the least effort requiring, easiest to replicate exercises for our calf and ankle mobility. Now, all we're gonna need for this is anything we can elevate our toes on, just like so. And we're gonna go into a stagger step, moving forward. And now all we need to do is push our butt forward more and more until we notice our heel raising. If your heel raises, that means you are too far forward and you should step back again, get your heel down to the ground, and you're gonna notice an amazing stretch in your Achilles tendons, moving up your gastric and soleus, and depending on how much you fold forward in your upper body, you're also going to include your hamstrings. Now, since we are for now focusing on the lower part of our legs, we will try and stay a little bit more upright. All you need to do is hold statically for 30 seconds, switch to the other foot, step forward with the other leg, and be sure to keep your heel on the floor. Moving up the chain to include our biceps as well, we're gonna start in a staggered standing position. And what's important here that before we move, we wanna switch our pelvic tilt, moving into spinal extension from here, keeping our back at the very least neutral. And all we wanna do is basically fold forward and reverse. Short, precise movements. Now you can hold the lowest point of the stretch for 30 seconds, or you can start working more dynamically with this exercise. You're gonna notice the front leg will have more pull on the upper musculature, while the back leg will have more pull on the lower musculature. So now you can combine ankle flexion in the back leg with a nice hamstring stretch in the front leg, moving all the way down to our calf insertions before we step forward with one foot, switch it up, and start hinging in our hips once more. Both legs fully extended. Move down as low as you can and move back up. As long as you keep your back neutral or in an extension, you will have a lot of pull, and that will keep you from making the most common mistake when it comes to posterior chain mobility, which is going into spinal flexion and rounding our back to compensate for a lack of flexibility in our leg musculature. Keeping your back extended will keep you from cheating yourself out of your own flexibility gains. And now we can start working a little bit more dynamically, starting from a deep squat or a resting squat position. For some of you, if you do not have already some flexibility in your posterior chain, or at the very least in your ankles, enough to sit down completely, you will have your heels slightly raised. Don't worry about it, over time it will get better. However, we want to get into this deep squat position, plant our hands on the ground, and all we're going to do from here is basically switch into a forward fold. And we're going to only extend as much as we can without our hands leaving the ground, which means that if you are here, you've already gone too far and you just need to bend your knees and keep your hands on the ground. This will teach us to go through this movement in a more controlled fashion, and once you are fully extended, being able to sway forward and going to more and more ankle flexion will lead to a far more effective stretch in our posterior chain. So level number one for this exercise is getting into extension. Once you have reached that, level number two is getting into extension and swaying forward before we reverse and get back down again. You can keep your hands as far forward as possible to extend and move forward into this sway without having to place your hands somewhere else. Full extension, move forward, reverse, and deep squat. Which moves us to the next exercise, being a downward dog position, mostly known from yoga. All we need to do is extend both legs, actively push our heels down towards the ground, and we're gonna start pushing our chest towards our legs. Arms extended and lengthened, legs extended and lengthened. We're already gonna have an amazing stretch in our posterior chain going all the way up to our glutes. Now what you can do from here to add a little bit more oomph to this exercise is start working dynamically, releasing the tension in one leg while pushing your heel down as much as you can into complete ankle flexion before you release and switch it up to the other leg. Now this exercise is one of my favorites in releasing tension in my posterior chain before I do any sort of advanced mobility or flexibility drills. As an added bonus, we are working a little bit more on our shoulder mobility as well, in conjunction with working on that posterior chain flexibility. Go through a handful of dynamic repetitions, like 10 to 12 for instance, and then hold a static one for 20 to 30 seconds. In between sets, I would advise just bringing your knees down and sitting back all the way, releasing some tension in your back, shoulder, and arm musculature before you move on, which moves us to our first seated exercise. All we want to do is plant our feet flat on the ground, and now we're going to bring both arms around our legs and we're going to hold them very tightly to our chest, because from here we're going to start extending both legs step by step, keeping our chest as closely as possible to our upper leg musculature and extending more and more and more. Now, once you have reached this level of extension and pushing your knees down, you're going to start actively raising your heels from the ground. Hold for a handful of seconds, release, extend your back, and switch. Rounded back, elevated heels, pull your face down towards your knees, release, and extend. Elevate, release, extend, and repeat. Now the same goes for doing this exercise in a standing position. We're gonna switch between extending our legs and bending them once more. And if we start moving forward with our butt into a little bit more of ankle flexion, just like so, before we revert, we're going to put more pull on our lower leg musculature and combine that with the pull on our upper leg musculature. Dynamic switches or holding for 10, 20, 30 seconds, releasing all the tension and repeating once more. Now, something a lot of people forget when working on their hamstring mobility is that it is closely connected to our glute flexibility as well. So what we're gonna do from here is use basically one of the most effective glute stretches and hip openers you can find. That will be the pigeon pose. Now, all you need to do from here is, from a quadrupedal position, just step forward, left foot to your right hand, and start bringing that knee into an external rotation towards the ground. And once you have the flexibility to get your leg into complete contact, now we can start actively pushing, driving our hips towards the ground. Now, ignore for a moment the amazing stretch we have in our glutes. An added benefit of this exercise is that we are also working on our hip flexor and quadriceps flexibility. So now we are combining the glutes on one side with the anterior chain on the other side, and over time you will be able to put more and more and more pressure on this stretch, moving lower and lower and lower. Now, the pigeon pose is such an amazing stretch that I have a full video dedicated to it with multiple levels of going through this exercise, because just this one exercise can help you advance a lot of different mobility goals you have. Now, this specific exercise has a myriad of benefits that go beyond posterior chain flexibility. We are working on our anterior chain strength. We are working on our control of those muscles and combining that with posterior chain flexibility. For this to work, you have to be able to sit fully upright with both legs completely extended. If you cannot do this, if you are missing the core strength or the flexibility in your posterior chain, you can lean back for the beginning, or what you can do is sit with a wall behind your back, forcing you into this extended upright sitting position. Because what we're gonna do from here is actively pull our toes towards our body by flexing our tibialis. Now, some of you might already have a stretch in the antagonists of the muscles we are flexing, which moves us to the next part, flexing our quadriceps, which is gonna force our knees down and almost elevate our heels from the ground, at the very least, if we're doing this correctly. And now we're gonna start flexing our hip flexors and our lower abdominals to raise one of those legs and release before we move on to the other side. But there's a reason why we are working on our anterior chain strength instead of our posterior chain flexibility. And that is a phenomenon called reciprocal inhibition, which is your body's mechanism of releasing tension and tightness in the antagonists of a muscle you are flexing at the moment. Which means that if you are flexing your quadriceps and your tibialis, your body actively releases tightness and tension in the antagonists, which are our biceps and our calf musculature, to keep us from getting injured. Because if we do this and we start raising, we have too much tightness here, we're just gonna snap and hurt ourselves. Our body knows that that is not a good thing, so it's gonna keep us loose and limber. You can just try it out by yourself. By flexing your biceps, your triceps will automatically have to release all the tension it has, or you're gonna snap your tendons out of your arm. Not a good thing. So we are gonna use our body's mechanisms to help us advance in our flexibility. And this exercise is by far one of the most effective ones when it comes to working on your posterior chain flexibility. And now, putting everything we learned together, we can start using the reciprocal inhibition part that we just worked on with the flexibility part, which we went through the dynamic and static exercises, to touch our toes. Now let's do this actively with a little bit more control. Start by flexing your tibialis, just like so, which is gonna pull in your toes. Next, flex your quadriceps, releasing tension in your hamstrings. Next, flex your hip flexors, which is going to start pulling your upper body closer and closer and closer towards your leg musculature. And then, only then, with our back still extended, at the very end, we're gonna start flexing our abdominals, which in turn is gonna round our back, get us into spinal flexion, and pull us closer and closer and closer to our leg musculature. Now, as you can see, I am not touching my toes. I am not actively using my arms to pull me deeper into a stretch. I am releasing all the tension in my entire posterior chain just by flexing my anterior chain. And this trick, so to speak, reciprocal inhibition, is absurdly effective in helping you advance your mobility in a much more effective way than going through static stretches and trying to pull on your toes and pull on your legs, trying to get you closer and closer. And now that we've learned to do this in a seated position, we can start learning how to do it in a standing position. Flex your tibialis, getting into the tiniest bit of ankle flexion. Flex your quadriceps and your hip flexors. And now flex your abdominals, pulling you closer and closer and closer to your legs. And only then can you start touching and pulling yourself the tiniest bit closer. There's not going to be a lot of difference between what you can do with your strength and what you can do by adding some pull by yourself. However, being able to do it like this is not only way more effective when it comes to working on your mobility, but also helping you to build the required control to get into more advanced flexibility positions, such as the front split, or by far one of my favorites, the straddle position or the pancake fold. Whatever it is you want to work on, knowing how to flex the antagonists of the muscles you want to stretch, like so, flexing my quads to release tension in my posterior chain will help you immensely in advancing your mobility work. Now, as for programming, going through the dynamic exercises by doing 12 to 14 repetitions, which means that 14 repetitions left leg, 14 repetitions right leg, 2 sets, and then adding the static stretches with 30 seconds each, going through another 2 rounds will get you into the ballpark of like 15 to 20 minutes of stretching. If you do this 3 to 4 times a week, I can guarantee you that not only will you be able to advance your flexibility way faster than you thought you could, if you use the hack we were talking about, you will get even faster results. But with that said, once again, that's all the time I've left you today. However, if you like the video and subscribe and check out other videos on this channel, because we literally have new ones every single day. And I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow. Captain Cairo. Peace out.